What if everything you think you know, like everything you experience day to day, is actually a story? Not just a story, but maybe the story your brain is constantly telling you. It's kind of a wild thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into this fascinating world of how narratives aren't just something we tell, but maybe something we actually are. We're going to explore how our brains seem to be wired for narrative, how these really deep stories influence our identity, our desires, and even how they can be, twisted intentionally or maybe unconsciously.
Yeah, and our mission today is really to cut through some of the noise on this. We've pulled together some really interesting research and insights. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding the massive, often hidden impact of narrative on your life. You'll start to see how what feels like objective reality is actually, well, deeply tangled up with the stories we live by. And this is crucial, the sort of subtle status games we all play. Get ready for some maybe surprising ideas about why you believe what you believe and why others do too.
Okay, all right, let's unpack this core idea first. When we think about being human, usually the first thing is survival, right? Food, shelter. Our sources talk about this as the realm of pure survival, material stuff, where we're not maybe that different from other animals. But then there's this other thing, this incredible, almost magical second realm.
Yeah.
It's totally non-physical. It's made of collective imagination, what the sources call a story world.
Exactly. And it's not an exaggeration. Our brains seem fundamentally programmed to connect with other brains and, well, turn reality into a shared story. That's where most of our thoughts, our worries, our wins, that's where they really live, in this story world.
So how central is this story world to, like, who I am?
Well, that's the amazing part. Your identity, the character you play in this narrative realm, it isn't physical at all. It exists only as an idea in your head and crucially in the heads of the people you're connected to. But this non-physical thing, it's of existential importance. I mean, think about it. People will give up unbelievable amounts of blood and treasure, even their lives, to defend and build their identity. Wow. Yeah.
And it's not just huge dramatic stuff. It's woven into, your everyday choices.
Okay, so if identity is a story, what does that mean for our beliefs? Are they just things we sort of soak up, or is it more active?
It's definitely more active. Our sources talk about active belief. It's a really deep insight. Your beliefs aren't just passive thoughts. They're like active scripts you live out. We don't just accept ideas. We actually act on them, perform them almost.
Okay, like how?
Well, it can show up in huge ways, right? Like whole ideologies or even cults, where people live by an idea like they're controlled by a parasite, as one source puts it. But it also happens in milder ways, like strongly identifying with a product. Are you an Apple or PC person?
That's an identity, right?
A story you're actively living, maybe even defending.
Huh. Never thought of it quite like that.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it means your perception of what's real and true is constantly being shaped, maybe even altered, by the brains you're connected to. You often see the world through the eyes of other people, especially people you see as people like us. So my reality isn't just my reality.
In a way, no. It becomes the objective truth for you, this shared reality, even if, from the outside, it might look like a distortion. Your brain has this thing called an interpreter module, like an inner voice, constantly spinning this personal narrative, trying to bring order from chaos to everything you experience.
Okay, that really clarifies how connected our minds are. And it seems like it's in this shared space where we're connecting that another big human driver kicks in, our need for status and belonging.
Oh, absolutely. We all seem to have this status detection system or hierometer. It's constantly scanning, where do I stand? Where do they stand? And this causes feelings from like joy to agony.
The impact sounds huge.
It is. There was this massive study, 123 countries, and it found that people's well-being consistently depended on the degree to which people felt respected by others. We are, it turns out, just completely preoccupied with what others think about us.
That makes so much sense, doesn't it? This need for status, for belonging. It must feed into that feeling of wanting to be the hero in a story.
Exactly. Your brain is constantly cooking up this self-serving, motivating, and convincing narrative about your life. It frames it like a journey, heading towards something hopeful. Even if, and this is the kicker, the story may be completely wrong. It's that inner interpreter again, weaving things together so you feel like you matter, like you're on a path.
And you see this play out in the real world in some really clever ways, right? Like
Yeah.
that "Don't Mess with Texas" campaign.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 80s, Texas freeways were apparently a mess, costing millions to clean up. The usual anti-litter ads, they just didn't work.
So what do?
They changed the story completely. Instead of "don't be a litter bug," they appealed to Texan identity. The idea was a litter bug just wasn't a real Texan because a true Texan valued the state's beauty.
And it worked?
Massively. That cleanup costs way down, all by tapping into that deep identity anxiety, that story of who a Texan is.
Wow. And companies must use this all the time.
Oh, for decades. Think about Apple's famous 1984 ad. Steve Jobs himself explicitly set it up as Apple, the underdog, fighting Big Blue, that's IBM, for anyone younger.
Right, the conformity jab.
Exactly. It appealed directly to people who identified with Apple's status battle, the fight for individuality. It was super risky, almost didn't even air, but it triggered this huge wave of buyers. It proved you could align a product not just with what it does, but with the user's own story and their status goals.
And then there's social media, which feels like maybe the ultimate version of this.
You could definitely argue it's the most brilliantly designed status game on the internet. Evan Williams, one of the Twitter co-founders, basically said his formula was, take a human desire, one that's been around forever, identify it, and use tech to remove steps.
So things like blue ticks, retweets, follower counts.
Pure slot machines for status. They give you these unpredictable rewards, a retweet from someone important, a bunch of new followers, and that makes engagement totally compulsive. That little thrill of being noticed, especially publicly, by someone you see as high status, that's an incredibly powerful, addictive pull. It taps right into that ancient wiring.
Okay, so it's pervasive. If we're living in these narratives driven by identity and status, how are really good stories actually put together? Whether it's fiction or, the stories we tell about ourselves.
Well, one key idea from the sources is the sacred flaw of a protagonist. This isn't just a simple weakness. It's like an identity-forming belief that's fundamentally wrong, but the character often can't see it.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, maybe a character believes they absolutely must control everything around them to be safe, but in reality, their biggest strength or their path to growth lies in letting go, in being vulnerable. Good stories, and maybe good lives too, often revolve around struggling with these kinds of flaws, these vulnerabilities. Even Disney, apparently, engineers struggle and vulnerability into their theme park robots to create an emotional connection.
Huh. Robots with flaws. Okay. And what about the plot itself? How does that get going?
That often comes down to the ignition point. That's the moment in a story, often unexpected, when some external event or change connects directly with the character's deepest sacred flaw. That connection triggers action, it launches the plot, and the sources stress that struggle in story is in itself highly identifiable.
Because it's human.
Exactly, because it's the human condition. You connect with characters who are vulnerable, whose struggles feel real, maybe echo your own on some level. It's often that moment the hero realizes they are part of the problem, not just the outside world.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there practical tips for telling better stories?
Yeah, Matthew Dix, who's apparently a master storyteller, offers some great ones. He talks about the 5-second moment.
5-second moment.
Yeah, it's the core meaning of your story, the absolute emotional peak, the reason you're telling it in the first place. And it should usually come near the end. Like, he tells this powerful story about childhood hunger, but says the real point, the 5-second moment, is when his wife reveals she knew his secret all along. Everything else just builds to that emotional clarity.
Gotcha. Build towards that core moment. What else?
He also pushes for cinema of the mind. Basically, always give your audience a physical location for every single moment in the story.
So they can picture it.
Precisely,
Yeah.
so they can see it playing out in their mind's eye. It stops the story becoming vague or abstract, keeps the listener right there with you. You're like building the set in their head.
I like that. Building this set.
And another clever technique, using humor strategically. It's not just to get laughs, it can be like camouflage for important details you'll bring back later. Or, even more powerfully, humor can create fantastic contrast to something authentically awful, making the sad parts hit even harder. Make them laugh, then hit them with something painful.
It deepens the whole experience.
Right, the contrast makes the emotion sharper.
And finally, for telling stories out loud, simplification is key. You want to keep the listener flowing with you, not stepping out of your river of words to make meaning on their own. The advice is, start as close to the end as possible.
Condense the timeline.
Yeah, think about movies. A heist planned over months gets squeezed into a few days on screen, right? To pump up the action, the emotion. Oral storytelling eats that too. Compress time, focus on the key moments. Makes it way more exciting.
Okay, so we've got how stories work, how we tell them. But what happens when that inner storyteller, the one trying to make us the hero, starts messing with reality itself? Ah, yes. This is where it gets really, really interesting and maybe a little unsettling. Your brain, trying so hard to make you the hero, is super prone to biases, like confirmation bias. We intensely scrutinize stuff that contradicts what we already believe, but we just instantly accept anything that confirms it.
We think we're objective, but everyone else is biased.
Pretty much. As one source puts it, exposure to a mixed body of evidence made both sides even more convinced of the fundamental soundness of their original beliefs. It just reinforces what you already thought.
Can you give an example of this? Cognitive blindness.
Well, a striking one is the case of David Irving, the Holocaust denier. The sources suggest he genuinely believed Hitler was innocent. He saw only what fit his narrative. Any evidence against it, he'd dismiss it as flawed, fabricated. He'd even, reinterpret words saying extirpate didn't really mean exterminate, just to keep his story intact. For him, his feeling, his story trumped any fact.
Wow, that's quite extreme.
It is, but it shows the power of the narrative. And you see versions of this in everyday beliefs, too. Think about the Morgellons community. Medically, there's consensus it's not what they believe, but they sincerely perceive microscopic fibers emerging from their skin. Their reality is shaped by this coherent set of beliefs.
So they see what the story dictates they should see.
Exactly. Even if a study came out supporting their view, some skeptics in that community might still dismiss it, saying it wasn't well designed or it's trash. The internal narrative is incredibly powerful.
And this extends to politics too, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. Our sources talk about political brains. Allegiances often aren't about pure self-interest, but about these deep, often unconscious moral feelings and hunches. The idea is that moral reasoning didn't really evolve to find objective truth, but more to help us argue our case, to persuade others in our group.
So our political leanings might be more hardwired than we think?
There's evidence for that. Genes might account for 1/3.5 of the variability in political attitudes, shaping whether you lean more towards openness or towards fear and caution.
Okay, this leads to a potentially darker side, doesn't it? These shared realities, these group stories.
It can, yeah. Groups can become these really tight status games, which can sometimes lead to things like moral panics. The satanic panic of the 80s is a stark example. In that atmosphere, the rule became believe the children. And chillingly, the more illogical and incredible a child's testimony was, the more likely it was seen to be true.
Because it fit the panic narrative.
Precisely. Denials from the accused were even twisted into proof of mind control. It's a tragic example of how these communal stories, fueled by group dynamics and fear, can end up justifying barbarity as holy. People do terrible things believing wholeheartedly they are right within their shared story.
Right. So after all this, what's the big takeaway for us, for you listening? We've gone through this incredible idea that humans are fundamentally creatures of illusion. We're constantly weaving stories, living inside them. Your identity, your connections, how you even see reality, it's all profoundly shaped by these narratives and these deep-seated status games we play. You are kind of literally made of stories.
Yeah, the really profound takeaway here is that the world feeling so solid and real, at its core, it's a story. It's conjured by connected brains.
Mhm.
And your view of that story is constantly being nudged and altered by the people you're connected to and by your own brain's biases. Now, knowing this isn't meant to make you cynical about everything. Not at all.
No, it's more about empowerment.
Exactly. It's meant to empower you, to encourage maybe a deeper critical look at the stories you're told, the narrative swirling around you, and especially the stories you tell yourself. It's about accepting this part of our human nature, recognizing that even when you feel absolutely 100% certain you're right, there's always a chance your inner hero is just, working a bit too hard on the script.
So here's a final thought to maybe mull over. If your brain is constantly spinning that story to make you the hero, what unexpected truth might be hiding in the flaws of your own personal narrative, waiting for its own ignition point to maybe reveal a surprising new path for you?